Joining me on Startup Report today is Jason Warnke, who runs digital enterprise at CIO organization within Accenture, which is not a small company.
We're at about 500,000 people now, which is unbelievable. We hired about 100,000 people last year
Wow.
and on pace to continue to do that. I've been with Accenture, like we were just talking, our office was based a few blocks from here,
Yeah.
downtown St. Petersburg. We called it Solution Works at the time. We were down here and we were focused at the time just on the utilities market, just the utility industry and the applications that utilities need. But the company has grown quite significantly. I think when I joined back then, Accenture had like 15,000 people,
Wow.
something in that range, and now we're 500,000 people 23 years later.
And what do you think was the driver for that growth?
We diversified quite a bit. So we started as a consulting company, and then we got into application outsourcing. We got into business process outsourcing. We got into the digital agency world, which really took off, as you can imagine. And now we're considered the largest digital agency on the planet, which is crazy. We bought a bunch of digital agencies like Fjord and others that Drogo 5, they came in as a part of Accenture Interactive, which is our digital agency. That diversification of the business and the growth of whole new areas, security is a practice that wasn't around years ago and now is a burgeoning massive business. So I think that the industry has changed and sort of the diversification, the idea that we're going to run these different businesses that serve the different parts of the industry.
Right. So we've got a couple cool things to dig into today. To start, let's hit Tampa Bay Tech, which you are now the chair of. Congratulations!
That's right.
On that. And we've been partnered up with Daniel James and Jill since the beginning of the Catalyst and Pitch List, and they've been great partners. Why does Accenture participate with Tampa Bay Tech?
Yeah, Tampa Bay Tech, and I've been involved since it was TBTF about 10 years ago. At the time, Anderson, or it was Accenture then. We started as Anderson Consulting and then turned into Accenture when we went public. But back then, we had this great business in town that was serving our utility clients all around the world, and we didn't have deep connections into the community. And we said, we need to find some great organizations that we can partner up with or we can become a part of. Tampa Bay Tech and the Chamber of Commerce in both St. Pete and Tampa, those were great organizations. We said, let's become part of the fabric of the community. And that's the point that I joined TBTF at the time, just as a participating member, and then a board member,
Mm-hmm.
and then executive committee member, and then as of recently, the overall board chair. And it's been an amazing way for us to understand what's happening in the community, to meet our peers in the community, meet our potential clients in the community. And the richness that we've discovered as a part of that has been just unbelievable. There is every day I come across another company or another individual in town, whether they have a business that's based here or if they are a part of a business that's based somewhere else that happens to just have an outpost here,
Mm-hmm.
or in today's world, there are a lot of remote workers that could be working for a multinational that just happen to have a few people, maybe even one person that's living and working here in Tampa Bay. It's phenomenal. And Tampa Bay Tech is just an example of an organization that you can become involved in, where you can understand, what's happening here and make those connections.
And what are your goals as chair for your term? Do you have any sort of specific things that you want to accomplish?
My big thing is we need to tell our story better. I think there are a bunch of different outposts. Catalyst is an unbelievable example of being able to get that news story out. What's happening in this community, not just with traditional technology companies, but now every business is a technology business. And so, even if you're a supply chain business or consumer good company, you're going to have some platform or technology that's driving and differentiates your business. And so we got to get the word out about the skill sets that are here, the companies that are building businesses and building companies and platforms here. So my big thing has always been, I went to school for marketing at USF, and I feel like we have such a ways to go. It's an incredible opportunity. I wouldn't say it's something that should count against us, but I think we have an awesome opportunity to really get better at telling our story. We have so many points of pride here, but we've got to find a way to get the word out.
And when you say get the word out, how much of that is local awareness and local connecting people together, and how much of that is getting the brand of Tampa Bay out to the world?
It's both. I don't think we can do the second until we do the first really well. In that goes like this. Essentially, we're all living and working here, and nobody is rarely are you working in a business that just serves the local market. Even if you're a small company, you're serving the markets outside of Tampa Bay. And if you don't know what is here to sort of collaborate or who you can collaborate with, how you can build with something that's here, you really can't do a good job of telling the story of what is special about Tampa Bay until you can sort of give a few examples of, hey, did you know? This is here and this is here. And I worked with these folks. And then you can start getting that. It ripples out from the local community really understanding what they have here. And we have these debates all the time. What is it that makes Tampa Bay special? Is our thing call centers? Is our thing health tech? Is our thing? What is our thing? And I think we constantly struggle with that. And I think our thing is a combination of things. I think it's not just one single thing, but I think there is something special. We haven't necessarily found out what that special thing is. I think we just need to figure out a way to tell a story of a community that knows how to work together really well. We call it radically connected,
Mm.
and so we want to be radically connected in our own community so that we can tell that story better outside of our community.
And what do you see as some of the most viable mechanisms for telling the story outside of the community?
The daily news that I read, I have my normal, places I go to catch up on what's happening in the industry. And the industry to me is the combination, is the full spectrum of what's happening in town, all the way to what's happening on the global stage. And so to me, I do a massive amount, as many people do, of news consumption through video sources, podcasts, news stories, news feeds, Twitter. And LinkedIn increasingly has gotten really good at a nice news feed that's super relevant to me. We have to find a way to get our stories into those feeds. Not that one feed is going to rule them all,
Right.
because people, have a different collection of stuff that they use to understand, to feed themselves. But how do we get our news stories into each of those channels? And we have to do it very intentionally. We just can't hope that it magically happens because we're writing the content, putting it on the shelf, and saying all these places are going to find it.
Right.
You've really got to, intentionally be looking at ways to get those into the different channels.
How do you do that specifically with Tampa Bay Tech? Obviously, it's just the two folks that are the full time people. Some resources, but not a team really to do something like that.
Right.
So, how do you execute on that vision?
So a few things we ask is that we know all of these organizations that are members of Tampa Bay Tech, whether they're a really small 4-person company
Mhm.
or whether a 500,000-person company like Accenture, they all have marketing PR departments, even if that's a one-person shop, all the way up to a very large one. They're already doing their PR, and if they're uh, in marketing, if they're driving a campaign on some new offering or new product they're bringing to market, and they're doing that in some other part of the world, we need to make that connection to say, hey, let's find a way to connect that story
Mhm.
to the team or the organization that sits here in Tampa Bay. So Accenture, as an example, Accenture is, pushing all kinds of content out there that has nothing to do directly with Tampa Bay.
Mhm.
But the fact that we have a large presence in Tampa Bay with people that are doing similar work, you can make that connection, and getting those stories in a newsfeed where you could say like, hey, did you know this company is based in, has a large presence in Tampa Bay. And so the types of things that this company might be working on here in town relate to the story that you just read. So we're really looking for those marketing PR organizations of these companies to get us their stories, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think we got to do more stuff like we're doing right now. We need to get our folks in these companies to either produce their own content that they're giving to us that we can get elsewhere, or we need to create a forum like this where we can just interview people about what they're doing. And you do a great job at our events where you're finding ways to, grab people for a couple of minutes in front of the camera. What do you do? What's your role? And then, we get that out there. And I think that's really, really important. To me, that's the way that you're going to start having those moments of, whoa, I didn't realize that so and so is based here in town and they have a product that does this and it's the top product on the planet that does this. Um, that's the way you create that momentum, in my opinion.
Yeah, and there's a lot of value in those connections. And you had mentioned in your example of four-person companies all the way up to a company like yours with a 500,000 people in it. What value have you seen coming out of Tampa Bay Tech with the varying sizes of the companies, their stages, startup to mature? It seems like a good mixing, a good place to mix and share a lot of valuable
I
information.
love, I'll just talk about some examples for me. I love this scenario where we, a company our size, is challenged with, we're trying to put a new solution. I'm responsible for a big part of Accenture's internal IT organization. We call it CIO, where we're trying to solve something, let's say in office scheduling or wayfinding in offices. We have 700 or so offices around the world, and we're creating a solution that helps people get around the offices and schedule space and find where their friends are working and these sorts of things. And where you could start to say like, oh wow, I just met a team that is here in town that has a solution that does blank. Where you can start to say, hey, it might not be the final place that I go to get the answer,
Right,
but at least I was exposed to something that was happening here that could result in a conversation. It works the other way as well, where I started to help a startup in town, give them mentoring advice. I with 23 years of experience at Accenture, you have a different scale of work that you do. So when someone is in a startup and they say, "Hey, we're trying to do this," just 5 questions or 10 questions that I challenge that startup on gives them a tremendous amount of insight. I've gotten their feedback several times, like, "Whoa, I had never thought of that." So I think it works on the inverse as well, where the larger companies are giving the younger companies the
right,
guidance. And for me, that's great. I don't get anything out of it other than the idea that that company might decide to stay in town and grow
right.
and become a bigger player that we could work with more collaboratively. So I think it sort of feeds itself. Both those young startups that are getting the advice and counsel and potentially business from the large companies and vice versa. So
I mean, Accenture we acquire a decent number of companies a year.
right.
So that's always there, and then and building platforms as well, and plugging in different utilities into platforms to make a whole solution.
That's right. There's no such thing anymore of in back in the day you could build, it was always about building custom apps, or you were going to buy some large package solution and you were going to customize it somehow, and you might have these whole ecosystems of companies that were specialists in customizing or integrating or extending one of these big platforms. In today's world, in a much different pace, there's no such thing as like these 12, 18, 24-month projects. There are sometimes, but most of them now are these very short bursts of sprints where you need to very quickly assemble a collection of platforms. Some could be from the large cloud providers, and some just small little niche players. And you're orchestrating solutions based on these. So you're always searching for, hey, I wonder if there's something that can plug in that can fill this little special niche that the cloud platform provider just doesn't have the scale to do, or has too much scale, if you will, because they can't focus on that one little sliver. So I do think all of the professionals in the ecosystem are wanting to make these radical connections because their job depends on it these days. The pace they have to run at, they always need to know, what these different things that they could assemble or knit into a solution are.
And speaking of storytelling, and you do a lot of that, or you're responsible for a lot of that in your role at Accenture. It's internal communications, everything IT, and then you actually provide the framework for other people to tell their stories internally. So storytelling as a shift from your work in the utility space, moving into this, has become a big part of what you do. What are some of the things that you're pushing out throughout Accenture to help people tell their stories?
Yeah, this is one of my passion areas, and it's actually the way that I became involved in CIO. We created, and a role was created that was knitting together a bunch of disparate capabilities that we had, and this is very much like any large enterprise, where over time, you have a team that builds portals, and then you have a team that has, doing something with social collaboration. You have another team doing something with search platforms and video, collaboration and these sorts of things. And we said, look, all of these things are about how Accenture could be a more social enterprise. So we called the area social enterprise and we brought them all together and we said, we need to find a way to make these things for our end users much more seamless, and we need to think about how you take these to the next level of end user expectation. So, what we used to do in our video conferencing or web conferencing, we'd have a leader. We call it our North Korea propaganda sort of format. You had a leader sitting in a conference room,
Right.
and they would just sit at a conference table for an hour and just espouse whatever it is. And a talking head for an hour, nobody had any demand for or patience or attention for. We needed to create television shows. So we actually started to build TV studios, and we had a group we now call Accenture Productions that runs 3 major studios around the world and a bunch of pop-in studios that are green screen, multi-camera, can be run remotely in one of our control rooms. And now we're producing these television shows. Anybody can create a television show or podcast and publish it out on our video portal. And that's because the end users are demanding a different way to hear a message and participate in that, and not just be a one-sided thing. So now our broadcasts are very much a two-way interaction, just like any consumer show where you've got call-in guests that are asking questions, and it looks and feels like a variety show.
Mhm.
Our CIO runs a quarterly TV show. Instead of sending out memos, he's doing these television shows to his large team globally, and they very much look like the Tonight Show. They're just full of fun commercials and full of. There's a studio audience that is active in the show, and that's all because our end users just don't have the attention span or the desire to sit and watch just one person talking or a couple of people
Right.
talking for an hour.
And all of that, when you say end users, that's just your internal
That's right.
employees. So it's all of that just for the employee base, which is a large one, but still, it's interesting that so much of that goes into just the employee base, let alone the whole world out there.
And we're doing a lot more of that where we're producing shows for our clients externally. So,
Mm.
they see our studios, they see the capability we have, and they're saying, "Hey, could you produce a show for us?" We're either a live show, or they might want to do just a pre-produced thing that a package that they'll then use with their groups. It's not just within our enterprise. We're seeing this across the patch, and that's another thing that I discovered as being involved in Tampa Bay Tech. As I started to talk to more leaders around town about this, they'll say, "Oh, we have a studio too." Yeah, we have a studio. We have folks that we hired from the TV industry, and we're running these podcasts. And you start to realize that there's a lot more of this going on than you may have originally thought. We sort of thought we were way out there, but a lot of large companies are doing things similar.
You allow a decent amount of autonomy in producing content. That you've had a proliferation of into the podcast studios internally. So that's a paradigm shift. To anybody can go in and create their content and put it out there. It's something that seems like it's just come up in over the course of a couple of years. So obviously, especially with sort of traditional thinking, there are risks involved with that. How do you manage so many people putting so much content out?
We know as folks come into Accenture, they're coming from places where they were open to create. They were creators on YouTube or whatever the channel was. And we don't necessarily want to, stop that energy or inhibit. We want people to share knowledge that they've developed, create channels if they want. And then we have areas of focus, so let's say, artificial intelligence is a space. We have people that are the curators of certain content areas that are always looking at the content just to sort of verify, but that we're not putting any direct editorial control over what is created and what's shared, because we really want people to lean into that and feel comfortable that they've got a voice and they've got a place to get the word out. And our folks are smart. If they're watching content that isn't necessarily the best content or best produced, that stuff's going to fall to the bottom, and the best stuff's going to rise to the top. And rising to the top is usually facilitated by that person has a certain number of followers because they are seen as the expert on whatever topic. And so that stuff gets boosted as it gets shared and proliferates.
Interesting. So you mentioned a lot of folks are coming in and out of that were doing things on YouTube previously. Um, how do you work to get equal coverage? So, I'm assuming that maybe some of the DBAs that are there, the compliance people that are there, do you struggle with people that are all of sort of one archetype or in one specific area of the company, do most of the content? And do you campaign to try to get people from all corners to contribute?
Yeah, so each of the businesses and each of our subgroups and things, they'll have their own marketing and communications teams that know all the channels and know the ways to create content on each of those channels. So the way I was describing it is, sort of, hey, anyone go at it, which they can do if they are so inclined and they have the skill set to do it. But we know the reality is we have to have people that know how the whole process works. So if you want to do a live broadcast, here's how you go about that. If you want to just record something pre-recorded and you want to, upload it here. If you want to do a podcast, here's how you do that. If you want to create a news story that gets published as an article on our news site, here's how you do that. So each one of those businesses has a team that can help you. And they really bring out the best of the folks that might not necessarily be like inclined, like a DBA or an analytics team
Right.
might not have people in it that are just like, hey, we should create a podcast or we should create a variety show about analytics. That M&C team, marketing communications team, will help facilitate the process of, hey, we're going to get you guys into a studio, we're going to record a little thing, and we're going to have it edited down to make it work. So they're not really on their own if they aren't so inclined to do that. But for those that really lean into it and they're comfortable, which we know, the generation coming into the workforce is a lot more comfortable doing that than most of, I don't want to say all, but most of the folks from the previous other generations that are at Accenture. We give them teams to help support the process.
And I guess I have to ask sort of one logistical question, from an efficiency standpoint. Just I think it'd be interesting to articulate the value of it versus the cost. So if you have 1,000 people that can participate and say they spend an hour on their podcast, and then there's potentially some production time, and then if the average person watches a couple podcasts, that can balloon into thousands of hours of employee time, and those kind of resources are not insignificant. So, when you're building your strategies around this, and you look at the resource consumption, obviously they're learning and getting better, so there's an educational value. What sort of the things that go through in your mind during that process?
We try to make the very simple as humanly possible on the creation side. So literally you can go to our media exchange and say record, and it just records whatever you're doing and you publish it to a channel. So you make that as easy as humanly possible. That scale that I described earlier about a full television show,
Mhm.
it's a variety show. That has a much different cost to produce, to plan, produce, and publish. And so, that we only reserve to the most
Right.
critical, high value things where, an alternative mechanism to reach everyone with key messages that we need to would be, either more costly or would not be as effective. So the key messages won't get across if you say, try to get these 4 things into an email that you think everyone in the organization is going to read. We know that's not the case. So it's always a balance of, hey, is the cost to produce this equal to the value you're going to get? But the idea is to make it as simple as possible for people just to share their knowledge, create a video, share it, and then others can consume it on demand.
Great. Well, I've enjoyed the conversation. What are we looking forward to? We have Tampa Bay Tech Awards coming up in the fall,
We
and
do.
then Empowered Up. I think you'll have your work cut out for you in the fall, coming up with an award as cool as the glow in the dark electrified catalyst logo. But
Yeah, that was a pretty cool award. I was backstage as you were preparing that for the recipient, and I was blown away. That thing was super cool.
yeah, I was just happy nobody got electrocuted. 'Cause it was
But yes, we have a busy fall. We have a busy rest of the year as we start thinking about other interesting ways to engage our audience instead of just those 2 marquee events. So we have something that I think was recently announced, the Virtual Tech Summit, which is going to be in the fall as well. So continue to watch the space. The award show is obviously the big marquee event, but we've got some other really neat ways to keep the community growing and engaged through the course of the year.
wonderful. Well, thanks for all you're doing. And
Thanks for
we'll be here
having
to
me.
support you.
This was fun. Appreciate it.
Thanks.